The rise and fall of Elizabeth Holmes and her billion-dollar blood testing startup, Theranos.
She was the next big thing, what everyone had been waiting for, the next Steve Jobs or the next Bill Gates, but of healthcare.
I must say, you're an extraordinary woman.
Is she a genius founder with a noble mission?
In my mind, I've always thought the true legacy of Silicon Valley is to build great products that can make a difference in the world.
Or a brazen fraud with a reckless disregard for human life?
I knew she was putting patients' lives in jeopardy. And she was saying things like, fake it till you make it. You do not do that with patients.
The jury has spoken.
Theranos founder Elizabeth Holmes has officially been found guilty of 4 charges in her criminal fraud trial.
Elizabeth Holmes had promised to change the world. Now she is almost certainly going to prison.
American Greed has the inside story of the tall tales spun for starry-eyed investors.
People are going to make a killing on Theranos.
The lies, the spies, the threats.
It's terrifying. You're like, is this person tailing me?
And the explosive defense raised at trial when Holmes herself takes the stand.
Holmes says she's the victim of a decade of sexual and emotional abuse at the hands of her former boyfriend and business partner, Sunny Balwani.
He, of course, denies all of this, calls the allegations deeply offensive and personally devastating.
Now, some people say that this was a case of money versus humanity, but there's really a lot more going on here.
By the time Elizabeth Holmes stands trial in the late summer of 2021, she is a walking Rorschach test. Young women dress up like her outside the courthouse and applaud the quote-unquote girl boss.
The Holmies, the Elizabeth girls fandom, is alive and thriving, and they're all over social media. Their reasoning is, well, male villains have become icons. Look at The Wolf of Wall Street and Jordan Belfort. So why can't Elizabeth Holmes become a female icon?
Others see the Steve Jobs wannabe, accused of 11 counts of fraud against investors and patients, as the symbol of everything wrong with Silicon Valley. The hubris, greed, and duplicity. But when she takes the stand in her own defense, there's another persona. Victim. She points a finger in the direction of her former second-in-command and secret boyfriend, Ramesh Sunny Balwani. Holmes says Balwani was a menacing presence at Theranos, who called the shots and cast a shadow over her life. Will the jury buy her story?
We have not seen an Elizabeth Holmes like this that breaks down, that cries, that is emotional. But at the end of the day, these abuse allegations really have nothing to do with what she's being charged with.
I grew up in a family that was very focused on the belief that we're all here for a reason and we're here to try to make this world a better place.
Holmes grows up a child of privilege in Washington, D.C. Her mother is a congressional staffer, and her father is a former Enron executive. Though they're well off, the Holmes family seems obsessed with what they don't have, according to one-time neighbor and former family friend, Joseph Hughes.
These kids are raised with the idea that, even though we live in what most people would think of as a very nice upper middle class way, it's not good enough, because it's not what the Fleischmans had.
Elizabeth's parents, he says, like to remind people that the Holmes bloodline is descended from the famed Fleischmann yeast family.
And we're not just supposed to be in a home most Americans would think is luxurious. We're supposed to be in an estate. We're better than this.
At 9 years old, little Elizabeth proclaims to her parents that she wants to be a billionaire.
She certainly had encouragement from them to at least start in this direction. And there's no doubt in my mind that for Elizabeth, the notion of becoming this family champion and restoring them to grandeur is part of who Elizabeth is.
And she's got no time to waste. Right after high school graduation, the overachiever jets off to Beijing to study Mandarin as part of a Stanford University summer program. Amid all the other 18-year-old strivers, one person in the program sticks out. He's a 37-year-old man named Ramesh Sunny Balwani. He's a software engineer, a seasoned veteran of Silicon Valley startups. and is already worth $40 million. Yet he and the soon-to-be freshman click.
I was studying at a program in Beijing University in China, and he was there.
She was very famous in the Stanford Chinese program because the entire department knew about her Chinese, her skills, and so that's how, when I first met her, I'm like, oh, you must be the Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes arrives at Stanford University in 2002 with an ambition so big, it's almost childlike. She wants to become the Thomas Edison of biomedical engineering. She's recommended to physician, inventor, and Stanford professor of medicine, Phyllis Gardner.
She came to me twice. I always try to help students. I will do anything I can.
Dr. Gardner listens patiently to Holmes's idea, a wearable device that would simultaneously diagnose and treat disease.
She wanted to make a skin patch, and she wanted to sample the blood to test for an infectious disease. And then she wanted to deliver antibiotics through the patch. Antibiotics are they're low potency. And a patch, you can't get things through the skin easily. And so, how are you going to do this?
Gardner believes Holmes's idea would require a quantum leap in science. But according to her, Holmes doesn't want to hear it.
I just couldn't help her. She didn't want help. She thought she knew the world of microfluidics and engineering, but she was just 19 and had a class or two.
So let me tell you a little bit about the class.
Undeterred, Holmes pursues a more receptive mentor, Stanford engineering professor Channing Robertson. Years later, New Yorker journalist Ken Auletta will interview both Holmes and Robertson.
In describing Elizabeth Holmes, he said, how often in your life do you get to meet a Beethoven, someone who is a genius? And he described her as a genius. He left his tenured position to join her, became a member of her board, and was a devout believer in her.
I have to tell you that this is going to be a special year because this is the last time I'm teaching the class.
Elizabeth Holmes has charmed her first champion. It seems Holmes has all she needs from Stanford. At age 19, she drops out to start her fledgling company, which in 2003 she dubs Theranos, a combination of therapy and diagnosis. And after Channing Robertson, Holmes gets her first financial pat on the back in 2004. That's when Tim Draper, a well-known Silicon Valley venture capitalist, invests $500,000 in the fledgling company.
And she said, I'm going to transform healthcare as we know it.
Around this time, Holmes abandons the wearable idea and conjures a more audacious vision, one steeped in a personal origin story she will recount years later when she's famous.
Having a needle in your arm is something that has kept people from taking care of themselves, right?
Absolutely, myself included. I'm absolutely terrified of it.
Holmes's lifelong fear of needles, she says, makes her fixate on a device that could perform hundreds of blood tests from a finger prick. Holmes calls her prototype the Edison, with a nod to the great inventor.
The idea of Theranos is a wonderful idea. We're going to make medicine cheaper for people. We're going to make it more convenient. It would be wonderfully disruptive, which is one of the things that Silicon Valley prides itself on.
And the investor class is all in. By 2006, she's raised more than $40 million in venture capital, including almost $6 million from media magnate Rupert Murdoch. The cash is designed to give Theranos engineers a long runway to perfect the Edison and someday bring it to market. But there's one big problem, according to journalist John Carreyrou. The idea is more science fiction than science.
When I started looking into Theranos, I learned early on by talking to laboratory scientists at universities, and the consensus among these scientists that I'd spoken to was that it wasn't possible. And it wasn't possible because that size of a sample isn't enough to do all those tests. And the quality of the sample that you get from a finger is just not as pure. It's polluted by tissue and cells that interfere.
The pie-in-the-sky idea becomes an albatross in the lab, and Theranos blows through its initial investments. By 2009, it's broke, with little to show for it.
Were you and Sunny Balwani ever engaged in a romantic relationship?
Yes.
Unbeknownst to investors, Sunny Balwani has been advising Elizabeth Holmes and secretly dating her. It will become an 11-year romance, with shocking details revealed at Holmes's trial. Holmes says when her relationship with Sunny first blossomed, she was vulnerable because she had been sexually assaulted at Stanford. She testifies that after confiding in Sunny, he told her, "I was safe now that I met him." But it's not just emotional shelter Balwani offers. He's a financial haven, too.
Long story short, I ended up giving a 12 or 13 or $14 million personal loan. I guaranteed a loan to the company.
The loan comes at a critical time, when Theranos is on life support. And just a few months after cutting this check, Balwani assumes the number 2 position at Theranos, Chief Operating Officer.
He became the guy managing things day to day, and he really became the heavy.
In this episode of American Greed,
100 bottles of freestyle for everyone.
No one knows how to party like Jho Low.
So he was known as a whale of the nightclub scene.
The mysterious businessman drops as much as $500,000 a night.
Even for bankers that he was going out with, they weren't used to this kind of spending.
He buys a $250 million super yacht and dates supermodels.
He would buy Bergen bags as gifts for the different models.
He was spending $10 million or $20 million at Las Vegas casinos.
He pals around with celebrities like Leo DiCaprio and even finances their movies.
Jho Low gave Leonardo DiCaprio an Oscar that Marlon Brando originally won for On the Waterfront.
But the feds say no one knows how to steal like Jho Low either, and steal on a scale the world has never seen.
This is one of the largest economic crimes in the history of the world.
It's award season in Hollywood. In January 2014, the Hollywood Foreign Press honors the best film and television productions at the 71st Golden Globe ceremony. Familiar faces grace the red carpet. Martin Scorsese, Tom Hanks, Idris Elba. One of the films nominated this year is Martin Scorsese's The Wolf of Wall Street. Based on the memoirs of disgraced stockbroker and former American Greed subject, Jordan Belfort, a.k.a. the Wolf of Wall Street. Belfort pleaded guilty to stealing more than $100 million from investors. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Belfort in a remarkable performance.
I'm talking about this.
The film is a box office smash, making nearly $400 million internationally. Scorsese's highest-grossing film of his career.
I know you're not following what I'm saying anyway, right? That's okay.
For his efforts, DiCaprio is awarded the Golden Globe for Best Actor, Musical or Comedy.
Goes to Leonardo DiCaprio.
When he accepts the award, DiCaprio is specific in his thanks.
Joey, Riz, and Joe, thank you for being not only collaborators, but taking a risk on this movie, truly.
Joey and Riz are Joey McFarland and Riza Aziz, the producers and founders of the production company Red Granite Pictures. Joe is 33-year-old Jho Low, the principal funder of the movie.
The story goes that Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio wanted to make The Wolf of Wall Street and had purchased the rights to the Jordan Belfort story. It was too expensive to make, the studio said, and so Leonardo DiCaprio and Jho Low decided together that Jho Low would finance The Wolf of Wall Street.
Leonardo DiCaprio became very close to Jho Low.
You know, in the credits of Wolf of Wall Street, at the very end, there's a note. Special thanks, Jho Low.
But Jho Low is no ordinary financier. Authorities say he's the architect behind a massive world-class theft, stealing $4.5 billion from the country of Malaysia.
I think it's just safe to say this is one of the greatest frauds of all time, certainly in our time. And it's bigger than things like even the Bernie Madoff scandal.
Leonardo DiCaprio's award-winning film is financed with dirty money.
They made The Wolf of Wall Street, a movie about criminals spending money in ridiculously lavish ways. Perfectly fitting that that movie was financed by fraudsters about fraudsters.
The story of Jho Low begins in the tiny Malaysian island of Penang, a former British colony. His family background is steeped in mystery. What is known is that Jho Low's family is part of the ethnic Chinese minority, and his father owns a garment factory that provides cheap clothes to the United States. Jho Low will later tell people he's the scion of a very rich family. Whether that's true or whether they are merely well off, it's clear there's enough money to get Jho Low out of Penang.
His dad was successful enough to send Jho Low away to a fancy British boarding school, Harrow, outside London.
Fancy is an understatement. Harrow is ancient. Shakespeare was a young lad when it was founded. Harrow alumni include legendary world leaders, the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, King Hussein of Jordan, and Sir Winston Churchill. Jho Low doesn't squander the opportunity to connect with the crazy rich and fabulously well-connected. In fact, one of the friendships he forges at Harrow is with Riza Aziz, a fellow Malaysian who eventually gets a shout-out from Leo at the Golden Globes.
He's the stepson of Najib Razak, who at the time I believe was the Minister of Defense.
After graduating from Harrow, Jho Low moves to the United States and the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. Once again, he makes connections to wealthy and even royal families from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Abu Dhabi.
He was surrounded by people who were much, much richer than him. He even told some people that he was a prince in Malaysia.
While still enrolled in college, Low makes a name for himself as an alleged financial wizard.
He started an investment fund while he was at Wharton. And that was making investments on behalf of some wealthy families he knew in the Middle East and around the world at that time.
The company's name is the Winton Group, where investors, and more importantly, Jho Low, can win tons of money.
He was very interested in using his social cachet and his social connections to get access to a lot of money to make investments.
And in a sign of things to come, Low is known for throwing ridiculous parties. For his 20th birthday, he rents out a club in Philadelphia, running up a $40,000 tab and becoming known as the Asian Great Gatsby.
A famous party he threw at the University of Pennsylvania, he actually stiffed the club owners. He convinced them that he had the money, and then when it came to pay the bill, he said he didn't have it, and he ended up paying a lot less.
The youthful transgressions are written off, but the connections abide. After graduating from Wharton, he helps the Kuwait Finance House, the world's first Sharia-compliant bank, purchase an $87 million luxury high-rise unit in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia in 2006.
He was coming across to them as this sort of investing prodigy just because of the way he was able to talk and sell himself.
While Jho Low knows how to talk, money speaks even louder. In New York, a mystery man has arrived on the club scene, and the paparazzi have taken note. The New York Post, running a picture of Jho Low with Usher, lays on the snark. His chubby, bespectacled appearance hardly meets the image of a wealthy gadabout.
Jho Low appeared from nowhere. Like, literally, everybody was talking about this guy because he was spending between $300,000 and $500,000 a night in New York.
Selma Fonseca is a photojournalist who covers New York City nightlife.
So obviously all the promoters and the nightclub owners wanted him to come to their places because, I mean, he was spending a lot of money.
So the clubs he liked were Avenue, the Pink Elephant. He would go to Tao. And when he came in, he would take over the whole club.
He always had a table right in the middle of everything. He was kind of a shy guy. His thing was to buy Cristal champagne. He always had tons of bottles.
It would start off with 10 bottles of Cristal, and by the end of the night, everybody in the entire club was drinking their own bottle of champagne or something or another bought by Jho Low.
A magnum of Louis Roederer Cristal retails for $700 per bottle, but at clubs it can cost $4,000. One night, Jho Low runs into Lindsay Lohan and surprises her with a gift.
Somebody told him that it was Lindsay Lohan's 23rd birthday, and so he bought 23 bottles of Cristal.
But one of Jho Low's favorite celebrities to party with is Paris Hilton. Reporter Bradley Hope learns that Jho Low is infatuated with the heiress and watches her movie House of Wax obsessively.
I think he had a sort of fixation with Paris Hilton.
My understanding is that he became very interested in Paris Hilton in college and had a crush on her. So when he had the means, he then basically bought access to her.
He and Paris frolic on his yacht, gamble in Las Vegas, and go clubbing in the world's most exclusive spots. Bradley Hope says it's not uncommon for Hilton to be paid in the six figures for each appearance with Low.
She would either be getting paid directly in cash or, getting to spend in whatever she wants at the club, or, when he would go gambling with people like Paris Hilton, he would actually give them chips, like $100,000 of chips, and they could go play and keep the profits.
Selma Fonseca shot this film, never before seen on American TV, of Paris and Jho Low in action in Saint-Tropez.
Paris loves to have fun, so she was dancing and, getting the bottles, spraying champagne.
He's in the south of France, surrounded by all of, to be honest, the world's richest people, and he's just showing off.
He would go on the microphone. He would say something like, for the waiters to bring a bottle for every person that was inside of the club. So they would bring 100 bottles, and then give it to everybody.
What's interesting about Jho Low is that he was an awkward person.
California girls.
Okay. And I think this was his way to buy in.
Using his wealth and status, Jho Low is able to buy many things. Over a span of 2 years, the feds say Low spends $200 million on gifts and jewelry for his friends and fellow partiers. Bernard Madoff masterminds the biggest Ponzi scheme in American history.
I would say he is the Charles Manson of the investment world.
Once living in the lap of luxury, now this is what he calls home. But Bernie Madoff isn't going away quietly.
Bernie, in a loud voice, said, "My victims."
What is life really like for Bernie Madoff behind bars?
Every time I saw him, he had a smile on his face,
There's a lot more to Bernie Madoff than, you realize.
I said, Bernie, what you're giving me is a lot of bull, Bernie. He got serious after that.
Now to the big story here in New York. CNBC's Scott Cohn is outside the courthouse in Manhattan. Scott, good evening.
Good evening to you, Brian. For nearly
June 29, 2009. After 3 months of waiting, the sentencing hearing for Bernard Madoff is about to get underway.
It was an amazing scene. So many people came just to be there, to catch a glimpse of what was going to go on. It was just an enormous amount of people because it was such an important event.
Inside, a group of Madoff's victims are already sitting in the courtroom, including Norma Hill, a woman who lost more than $250,000 in the Ponzi scheme.
There was a real undercurrent in the courtroom. There was this silence, and yet there was this, you could almost feel people breathing, you know, wondering what was going to happen next. You could cut the tension with a knife.
The courtroom waits until one of the most hated men in America walks in, Bernard Madoff. Bert Ross, an attorney who lost $5 million to Madoff, sits in the front row.
It was chilling. It was like being in the presence of the devil. I mean, the man is evil.
I was actually seated in the jury box, so I was very close to Bernie Madoff. He was kind of rumpled in his suit, and this was not someone who normally went out in public rumpled. A lot of the life was just out of him. He was a zombie.
One of the victims shouted out to him, "Mr. Madoff, turn around and look at us." He didn't move. He was completely cold and unresponsive.
Before Judge Denny Chin can reach his decision, Bernard Madoff stands up and addresses the court in one final gesture. He tells the judge, quote, "I live in a tormented state, now knowing of all the pain and suffering that I have created. I have left a legacy of shame." Then, Madoff turns and faces his victims, people he conned out of their life savings. He says, quote, "I apologize to my victims. I am sorry. I know that doesn't help you." After losing more than $1 million to Bernie Madoff, Steffi Halio says she has no interest in his apology.
He doesn't care how he ruined us. He doesn't care the lives that he destroyed. He doesn't care the people who killed themselves because of this. He's a monster.
After 3 months of anticipation, Judge Chin hands Bernard Madoff the maximum sentence, 150 years. Ronnie Sue Ambrosino, a woman who lost $1.6 million to Madoff, focuses on the next step for her and the other victims.
2 questions. Where is the money, and who else did this with you? And that's all I care about.
Outside the courthouse, mobs of reporters clamor to hear the victims' stories.
When I left the courthouse, I don't think I was as fully prepared for the scale, the enormity of the presence of the press. There was, I don't know, a bank of microphones, maybe 40 microphones.
I am pleased and not surprised by the judge's ruling. I think that 150 years under the circumstances was warranted.
After the sentencing, guards returned Madoff to his 8x8 cell in Manhattan's Metropolitan Correctional Center.
Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City, which is a kind of hellhole. He's kept in solitary, which means he's allowed out of his cell 1 hour every 24 hours. In a short period of time, Bernie goes from Park Avenue in Palm Beach in the south of France and planes and yachts to an 8x8 cell. So Bernie really falls, and falls hard.
With the sentencing hearing over, Madoff knows how long he'll be in prison, but he doesn't know where he'll serve out his term. In some cases, inmates are transferred to prisons close to home. That way their families can visit easily. For Madoff, that means a prison within driving distance of New York City. One option, Allenwood Federal, a complex in the foothills of the Allegheny Mountains. Allenwood could be difficult for Madoff, especially if he bunks in the high-security unit with some of the prison's most hardened criminals. In the other direction, Madoff could find himself at Otisville Prison in the southeastern tip of New York State. If Madoff's lucky, he'll move into the prison's minimum security camp. July 2nd, 2009. As federal marshals seize Madoff's penthouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side, the 71-year-old convict sits in the city's Metropolitan Correctional Center. The Bureau of Prisons decides that in less than 2 weeks, Madoff will move to his new home, Butner Prison, 45 miles northwest of Raleigh, North Carolina. Some of America's most notorious criminals call Butner home. Among them, Omar Abdel-Rahman, otherwise known as the Blind Sheikh. He was the mastermind behind the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993.
Which killed 6 people and injured more than 1,000.
Another Butner inmate, Carmine Persico, a boss of the Colombo crime family. Some of Persico's men have nicknamed him Immortal because he was shot 20 times and survived. Rounding out the group, Russell Weston, a paranoid schizophrenic.
Time reversed me back to the point where I am no longer deceased.
Who walks into the U.S. Capitol and shoots 2 police officers in cold blood. Madoff will have to be careful. The 5,200 inmates at Butner know he's coming, and they'll be ready. Unlike most prisoners at Butner, Madoff chooses to enter a life of crime after already earning millions of dollars legitimately.
The fascinating part of Bernie's story is that he actually doesn't need the money. He doesn't need to do a Ponzi scheme. He's very wealthy, very influential, very well regarded.
All that money could easily make Madoff a target once he gets to Butner Prison.
Now to what will soon be disgraced financier Bernie Madoff's new home, and this is the place, the Butner Federal Correctional Complex in North Carolina. That's about 45 miles northwest of Raleigh, and CNBC's Scott Cohen is outside the gates. Scott, good morning to you.
Good morning, Matt. The Federal Bureau of Prisons website still has Bernie Madoff this morning at a federal penitentiary in Atlanta, but sources say that is just a stop on his way here to Butner, where he's about to spend the first day of the rest of his life.
Nobody knew quite for sure when he was going to arrive, but we were looking for any little signs of motion. And then the bus was sighted.
July 14th, 2009. According to inmates, Butner prisoners worked themselves up into a frenzy. Sean Evans spent 23 months inside Butner Prison for illegal possession of a firearm. In his first television interview, he tells American Greed what it was like to be on the ground that day.
The day that he arrived, there were helicopters over the compound. That was all the talk. Bernie Madoff's coming. Bernie's coming.
Speaking on condition of anonymity, a current inmate says Madoff's arrival by bus was a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
It was like a mayor or a president was coming in because helicopters were all over the place and the news media was all over. You could see news media cars near the camp and so on. The whole place was surrounded.
Bernie had been on the TV. He'd been in the newspapers, and prisoners followed the news assiduously. So Bernie arrived like a celebrity.
Inside Butner Prison, the guards hand Madoff a standard-issue hygiene kit, complete with a bar of soap, toothbrush, comb, and razor. The way Sean Evans sees it, the guards at Butner act more like bellhops than enforcers.
It's Mr. Madoff that, Mr. Madoff that, this, not inmate or your number or nothing like that. They see him on the TV all the time. I wouldn't expect for him to just be all starstruck like that. It's always, yes, sir, no, sir.
The guards inform Madoff that he can wear a watch in Butner, but not one valued at more than $75. That's quite a change of pace for a man who takes pride in his timepieces.
He was a huge collector of beautiful and expensive watches. And he went from that to a Timex Iron Man, which I think sold for about $46 at the commissary.
Once he's done with intake, Madoff steps out onto the prison yard for the first time.
Butner looks like a college campus. It's got lawns and trimmed hedges. If you've been in other penitentiaries, state penitentiaries, federal penitentiaries, maximum security, you know that Butner is a great place to end up.
In fact, Butner, the first LEED-certified green federal prison in the country, was originally built as an incentive for convicts. Downtown New York City, epicenter of a young, chic, creative world, where in 2016, 28-year-old Vanity Fair photo editor Rachel Williams' life intersects with that of Anna Delvey, a new face on the scene.
I met Anna out in New York one evening. I had gone out for some drinks with some girls I knew, and Anna joined us at this lounge on the Lower East Side. And I had seen Anna in photos on Instagram and saw that she had over 40,000 Instagram followers. She had a lot of artsy photos of travel and art and shopping, pictures with people in the fashion world.
Rachel and Anna hit it off and began a friendship, although their lives couldn't be more different. Anna has an unusual and somewhat fabulous address. She lives at the 11 Howard, an exclusive and sceney Soho hotel, popular with fashion and art professionals, with rooms starting at more than $500 a night.
So a lot of Anna's lifestyle was very different than mine in all sorts of different ways. For instance, her living in a hotel full-time. I didn't know anybody else like that.
For Rachel Williams, the timing is right for a new friendship.
I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship, and here's this person I liked who's living walking distance from my apartment, who seems really excited to spend time with me. We would often eat dinner or have drinks in her hotel, and she would always sign the bill to her room.
The seemingly endless flow of champagne is more than Rachel can afford. But Anna doesn't seem to mind.
She asked me at some point how much I made, so she knew what my financial situation was, but she really liked these expensive experiences. Anna was like, it's more fun to have someone there with me, so I was happy to go with her.
When she is not treating friends to luxury experiences and being seen at all the most exclusive downtown restaurants, clubs, and events, Anna Delvey is working on her pet project. An audacious concept she calls the Anna Delvey Foundation.
She wanted to create this giant art gallery space, a members-only club, restaurants, bars, lounges. And she had been meeting with lawyers and bankers trying to finalize the lease.
Her foundation claims to have a board of directors with a who's who of top-tier artists, collectors, real estate moguls, and restaurateurs. Anna hires a London-based design firm to bring her vision to life in the form of an 83-page PDF laying out her plans.
I mean, it ranged from exhibitions by top artists like Cindy Sherman and Daniel Arsham and Urs Fischer, who again are, top blue chip contemporary, to multiple restaurants, artist residencies, a German bakery, a very exclusive club.
According to ArtNet reporter Eileen Kinsella, in the New York art world, it is not out of the ordinary that a 20-something with a trust fund and a penchant for modern art could be taken seriously.
I would have thought this is a very wealthy person with extremely high ambitions and ostensibly the power to make it happen, because I do feel a lot in the art world that things will come on our radar where it's a younger collector who clearly has access to a lot of funds and is able to easily immerse themselves in the art world and figure out who the best artists are and establish themselves sort of on the scene. And that's clearly what she did.
The Anna Delvey Foundation centers on leasing a historic building at 281 Park Avenue South.
It has this Gothic architecture. It's very stunning. And she claimed that she was negotiating a lease, part of which involved going to City National, that was one of the banks that she approached, and saying that she needed a $30 million loan in order to make this happen. And that claim linked to another claim that she made, which was that she was a German heiress and that when she turned 25, she was going to be entitled to a 60 million euro inheritance.
I admired that she was so motivated to do something with that wealth. And I admired her ambition and her focus.
Anna spends much of her time networking with influential people, including the CEO of Blade, a private jet rental company. When Anna says she needs to fly to Omaha, Nebraska to attend the Berkshire Hathaway annual shareholders meeting, she books a private jet through Blade and doesn't blink at the $35,000 price tag for a round-trip flight to attend to what she says is family business. It seems to be just another day in the fabulous life of the German heiress. A week after her return from Omaha, Anna tells Rachel Williams that her visa is expiring and she needs to leave the country to reset it. Rather than return home to Germany, Anna decides she wants a more extraordinary trip to Marrakesh, Morocco. As socialites are wont to do, she decides she needs her every move videotaped.
She had this idea that she wanted to create a documentary about the creation of her art foundation. And to do that, she wanted to first see what it was like to have someone around with a video camera. So she framed the trip to Morocco as though it were going to be this business expense, and she was going to create some sort of footage from it.
When Anna's preferred videographer backs out, Rachel introduces Anna to her friend, Jessie Hawk.
Right away, I got the sense that she was very self-important, and she kind of demanded a certain amount of attention by the way she carried herself. She was really good at projecting the way she wanted to be perceived, that her ideas were unique or noteworthy.
1 week later, she had reserved this private villa at La Mamounia, which is this extremely opulent 5-star resort in Marrakesh. And she booked it and then was like, who else should we invite? So she decided to bring the personal trainer who we'd been working out with, as well as a videographer.
As it's a business expense, Anna has offered to cover the cost of the trip for all of her invited guests. But the day before they are supposed to leave, she hasn't booked the flights.
So I'm texting back and forth with her, I found these flights that could work for everybody, like, how can I help you? So I booked 4 one-way flights using her credit card, but it doesn't go through. So I tell Anna, you need to call your bank. It's like $4,000, I think. I assume that it's been flagged for fraud. And it created this sort of false sense of urgency, I think, which, motivated me to say, oh, should I use my card and you pay me back? And she said, yeah, only if that's okay for you, I can wire you on Monday.
Rachel Williams says she fronts the cost for the flights to Morocco.
So that's how it started. It started with the flights, 4 one-way flights, about $4,000.
Anna Delvey and her entourage arrive at JFK Airport to fly out of New York City on first-class tickets to Marrakesh, Morocco. Anna's friend, Rachel Williams, says she buys the tickets believing that Anna will reimburse her. But the expenses don't stop there.
When we go to check in and there's an issue, Anna has accidentally checked her wallet that she had all her credit cards in. So she has her passport and nothing else. But because she already owes me money, she says, can we just add, the checked baggage to what I already owe you? So it was like one thing and then another thing. And then, of course, for the rest of the time, I booked flights that had a 6-hour layover in Lisbon. So I'm paying for meals for everybody, starting in the airports before we even arrived to Marrakesh.
La Mamounia in Marrakesh is one of the chicest, priciest resorts in the world, and a favorite with the fashion set. Anna reserves their most expensive room, a 3-bedroom, $7,500 a night riad, or villa, for the week.
The hotel has 4 restaurants and 3 bars and sprawling gardens and a private pool. It was ridiculous.
Anna spent money like there was an endless supply. We were drinking $200, $300, $400 worth of wine or champagne every day. Documenting Anna is like watching one of your friends texting people on their phone all day, or sleeping, or eating, or drinking. I've got about 378 shots of Anna on her phone, though. And so we kind of waited on her a lot, or just whatever her whims were.
Am I that fascinating? We went into this place called the Medina, which is this old ancient marketplace. It's a walled compound. You walk through it. And Anna was really focused on trying to buy some caftans, some Moroccan dresses. So we were shown to this dress store, and Anna picked out $1,300 worth of jumpsuits, dresses, all of these things, goes to use her card, and of course it's again declined.
Rachel Williams is covering the incidentals, but there is a larger issue, the La Mamunia.
They hadn't been paid a cent, and Anna just kept saying the same thing. She was a broken record, you know, like, I don't understand. I've given you the routing number, or I've given you the bank code. I don't know why you're bothering me about this.
The situation comes to a head when hotel security confronts Anna about her failure to pay for the villa.
It was alarming to me. She seemed disconnected, I think, from the urgency of the situation. But she told me she was waiting on calls to be returned. One of the managers looked at me and was like, "Do you have a credit card?" And I looked to Anna like, "What?" And she goes, "Can we just use it for now?" The men weren't smiling. They didn't, you know, I was intimidated, and I felt pressured from Anna as well.
Rachel Williams hands over her credit card and is told there will be a hold placed on the card until Anna Delvey's funds are accessible. The next day, Rachel leaves Marrakesh for a work trip, only to find out that the hold on her credit card at La Mamunia isn't just a hold. With no other form of payment ever presented, they run the entire cost of the stay, splitting the charges on her personal and corporate American Express cards for a total of $62,000. Stacy Keach here, feeling greedy for more videos like this one? Then be sure to like and subscribe right here on CNBC Prime.